just to start off with a bit of a kind of overview about the agenda for today, for the webinar. Obviously, welcome to everybody who's joined us. As Maggie said, we're really excited about this procurement and very much looking forward to updating you as suppliers on our current thinking. This is really the start of our formal pre-market engagement and a chance to build out on our thinking with both existing and new suppliers. Clearly, we know the recruitment market is very agile, innovative, growth of technology, having some big impacts at the moment, and therefore we want to really enable and support market development within our agreements, and to kind of take advantage of some of the feedback that we can get from you as suppliers to build the best possible agreement. Our agenda for the session, as you should be able to see in front of you now, is to start with some objectives, which I'll talk about in a second. We'll then talk you through where we are now and the current landscape for health resourcing as we see it. Hopefully you'll agree with us, but you may have some other views as well that you can feed in. That will be followed by an overview of the proposed new model for our Crown Commercial Service Health Sector Resourcing Agreement, HSR, and also some insights into what CCS is trying to achieve with the proposed new agreement. Finally, there will be a chance to get feedback and input from you as attendees, the polling questions, and also any questions that you want to put on the chat function. And we'll also explain at the end other ways that you can engage with us after today. Just to reiterate, using the webinar, you've got the ability to send in questions and comments anytime during the presentation. So do type those in the chat function. We will try our best to answer some of those at the end, and then any points that we've missed or questions that we don't get to, we will circulate in the form of FAQs afterwards via websites. So on to the next slide. We're going on to webinar objectives and on to the next one actually as well. Yeah. So you should be able to see a slide with kind of three key objectives for this session. I think we wanted to run this webinar for a number of reasons, but first and foremost because we see it as a really good opportunity to engage with the supply market at what is an early stage of our process. We can share our thinking, but also gather your input. As I said, we want your views on how to make this a really successful agreement. Hopefully we'll be able to take the opportunity to do an initial temperature check on our strategy. And then, as I said, we will be doing some further engagement activities after today, which we'll explain at the end of the presentation. So 3 key objectives for the session, as you can see: provide you as suppliers with feedback on where we are with the strategy and progress to date. Secondly, to share our current thinking on the as-is landscape, the proposed new model, and next steps in the process. And finally, to give an opportunity for you to feedback on the new model and provide input to help us shape the agreement. Moving on to the next slide. It looks like everything's working now, so hopefully you can all see these slides. Just a bit of an intro really on what is health sector resourcing, or as we'll probably refer to it as we go along, HSR, and where does it fit within our Crown Commercial Service portfolio. So the CCS workforce category has in place or is in the process of tendering some key agreements at the moment. Some of you will be aware of those, I'm sure. Public sector resourcing is our big contingent labour agreement for central government and other organisations. We've got permanent recruitment, which covers common roles, which is out at the moment. And we also have our supply teachers agreement for the education sector, which is out at the moment. Alongside those, at the end, we've got health sector resourcing, which will be our new commercial solution for resourcing for health and associated customers, i.e. anyone with health resourcing needs. In the first instance, that agreement will obviously replace the existing CCS agency and bank agreements that some of you will be aware of and probably some of you engaged with. And obviously we've got the list on there. Those are multidisciplinary temporary healthcare workers, RM 3711, workforce management, RM 1072, and non-medical, non-clinical, or NMNC, RM 971. However, our aim really is to try and go further than that, to expand the scope and to look at both additional areas of resourcing. So we will be looking at things like permanent recruitment, statement of works, and workforce consultancy. But also look at the opportunity to provide some access for our customers to more innovative resourcing models. And we'll describe the detail behind our structure and kind of planned agreement later in the webinar. I think just to really kind of finish this a little bit off, we feel that at CCS we have a unique and actually very powerful role within this sector, in the sense that we have this chance to deliver some really kind of fit for the future commercial solutions, helping take our customers on a journey from some of the more tactical approaches to more mature models. Clearly, we have a national perspective and across multiple sectors. As you can see, we work with central government, education, health, and other sectors. So we have this chance to bring, some really good industry best practice into play as well, and also really kind of enable some change delivery for customers. So that's really kind of critical to us. And finally, some of you may be aware or involved in the Department for Health working pilots that are going on at the moment. We're obviously working with the Department of Health to ensure that we're building in some of the outputs of that into this solution as well. So I will now hand over to Angela, and we'll just move the mic around, and she will talk about our current view on the current landscape.
Thank you, Clemmy. So I thought it would be useful to give some context to HSR and the strategy that we're proposing, to have a brief overview of the current landscape for health resourcing. You can see from those figures up on the screen now. So in 17-18, there was an increase in the NHS overall pay bill of 1.2%, with spend at 51.2 billion for the year. And temporary resourcing through agency and bank solutions represents about 10% of that at 5.2 billion. One of the main trends for temporary health resourcing spend over the year, certainly for CCS and wider in the market, was the migration of spend from agency supply to bank, with about 0.5 billion spend moving from agency to bank over the year. Now, that does represent a significant shift in the sourcing of temporary workers over the last 12 months. And as you all know, I'm sure that has been driven by the increased control and scrutiny of agency spend, along with NHSI and DHSC policies, and initiatives to encourage development and expansion of bank arrangements in the NHS trusts. We anticipate that this shift in spend will continue over the next 3 to 5 years as more trusts look to expand their bank arrangements into new staff groups and collaborative banks covering a number of trusts. If we move on to the next slide, that previous slide was the financial landscape, but we also have the context of temporary resourcing in the health sector against a continuing high level of vacancies within the NHS. So this is Q3 data for 2017-18, and it puts vacancy levels at 100,000 across the NHS, with 36,000 in nursing and 9,500 in medical. The current temporary resourcing levels for agency and bank are also outlined here for your information. Our customers, NHSI and DHSC, would like to increase the bank levels of fill in these areas and see that as a way to both control and reduce the cost of temporary staff resources. Certainly, we've seen significant growth in our workforce management agreement over the last 2 years, showing that customers are looking to the market for solutions and resourcing options outside of traditional agency supply models. Lucy Upton, who manages the commercial agreements on the team for health, will now give you a bit more detail on the current spend picture for CCS.
Thanks, Angela. This has been a very competitive market where frameworks have existed all alongside each other. The total spend has been made up of both clinical and non-clinical agency staffing. You will see from the statistics that the majority customer spend has been made by NHS customers, and this has helped formulate a large proportion of our engagement activity. Again, as reflected in the wider market, we have observed a shift from agency to bank spend. Moving on to the next slide. There are a number of factors that are impacting the health markets. As we covered earlier, the background of rising vacancy levels for NHS staff, particularly in clinical roles, is significant in increasing reliance on temporary and flexible resources to maintain patient care. The introduction of agency rules in 15-16 has impacted the market, with price caps operating well for nursing and non-clinical roles. They have been slower to impact on the medical roles. The The impact of increased scrutiny on agency spending and initiatives from NHSI and DHSC to reduce agency spend have contributed to a shift of temporary resourcing towards bank models, in-house and outsourced. There have also been strong developments in the collaboration of trusts and STP areas to pool and share resources. The combination of all these factors has led to larger trusts adopting more strategic resource models. Clemmy will cover the longer-term picture on the next slide.
Thank you, Lucy. So following on from what Lucy's just said, this slide that you're now looking at provides our CCS's high-level overview of the journey we've been seeing within the health workforce market and how we really think that might continue over probably the next kind of 5 or so years. Just a few things to kind of pull out here. Firstly, we feel that the landscape has been driven by some quite significant priorities in recent times. Certainly priorities around patient safety following the Francis inquiry, and also the increased regulation which came in with the NHS Improvement Agency rules and price caps. Looking at customer approaches, we've mainly seen fairly traditional transactional shift models to be dominant in this market in the past, and that kind of approach of trust, just working very hard to fill a shift and do so now, with the agency rules in place within a stipulated rate. More recently, we've seen good practice emerging around alternative resourcing models, as Angela referred to, staff bank being a particular example of that. But also we have seen early managed service approaches and the introduction of some new technology, things like app-based booking software and the like. Some of these approaches, again, as some of you will be aware, are being trialled within the Department of Health, DHSC, flexible working pilots, and I think we're all kind of eagerly awaiting the outcomes of some of that. CCS really does want to play a role in the business change challenge here. We want our new HSR agreement to provide a commercial route for customers to consolidate spend, to access more mature resourcing approaches, and to move towards a more total resourcing approach, which will bring in different resourcing models appropriate to different requirements. Obviously, we understand that will take time. This isn't a one-size-fits-all landscape, clearly, but we really do want to work with customers and suppliers to move the landscape forward. Moving on to the last slide in this section. So the opportunity for HSR, and you'll see there's quite a few points on there. I'm not going to go through all of them in kind of minute detail, but just to pick out some of the key opportunities that we see in place for HSR. Firstly, we recognise, as we've mentioned a few times now, the recruitment market is very much a dynamic market and it's under pressure. And we are trying to do everything we can to build within this agreement a flexibility and agility to allow for different resourcing approaches and different solutions for different customers. We want to capture more spend under our agreement, and we really want to reduce the off-framework activity, which is very hard to control, clearly lack of visibility around that. So that's, a key driver for us. Also, we want to introduce new routes to resources, so permanent recruitment, as I've already mentioned, and workforce consultancy and statement of work, alongside things like agency and staff bank. We want to look at embedding technology in the resourcing solutions to improve the data, improve that understanding of how trusts are currently managing their workforce, and obviously support better workforce planning and better decision making. And finally, alongside the traditional preferred supplier list, PSL style transaction models, which, as we've said, have been fairly dominant in this health market, we want to bring access to new resourcing solutions, and we see that as very much supporting the Department of Health and NHS improvement goals. So I've spoken for a little while, we've all spoken for a little while now. Your chance as attendees of the webinar to answer a question now. So you should be able to see on your screen a polling question 1, which is, over the next 5 years, where do you see the biggest proportion of health resourcing spend being concentrated? And if you could select one from the list provided, which are permanent recruitment, transactional agency activity, staff bank, in-house or managed service solutions, or statement of work. you could choose the one of those that you think is going to be the kind of dominant resourcing solution. I think you'll have a few seconds to do that. Results coming in, or asked by technical colleague. We'll just give you a few more seconds to respond. Excellent. So just having a quick look at what's come through. It does look like staff bank is being seen by a lot of you as a key area going forward, which clearly reflects what we've just been saying and our understanding of things at the moment. So yeah, it's good to see that our kind of thinking is aligned, and very much staff bank will be a key pillar within our future agreements. So we will be making sure that is incorporated. Okay, so following on from that, another polling question from us before we move on. So this question, you should be able to see how much change do you envisage to resourcing approaches in the health and associated sectors in the next 5 years? And that's on a scale of 1 to 5. So 1, very minimal change, up to 5, very significant change. If you can give your response to that. Right, we'll give you a couple more seconds and then we'll shut that one. Yeah. So not particularly surprisingly, it looks like most people are coming back saying 4 significant or 5 very significant for that one. And again, that very much reflects our thinking here. We see a lot of change going on already, and we believe that will continue. And as I've said, the CCS really does want to make sure we're part of that change journey, and we're supporting that, working with customers and suppliers. So again, a key part of our thinking for this agreement. So moving onwards now into a section just giving you some information about customer feedback to date on this, and I will hand over to Lucy, who will talk a bit more about that.
Thanks, Clemmy. As CCS, we've already completed some customer engagements on both what customers feel about the current workforce solutions in the market and where they would like to see services focused in the future. We held a number of workshops in January this year and have completed some one-to-one sessions. This slide gives an overview of what customers tell us they want from HSR. Some key areas of the feedback in particular have been a route for permanent recruitment, including international, the ability to source different models from small tactical call-offs to larger managed service options, a single agreement which covers all aspects of resourcing, support with planning and implementation of solutions. We'll be continuing our consultation with customers on HSR with customer board and input into strategy and the procurement. So some more interaction for you now with our third polling question. You should be able to see that, but if you can have a look at does the feedback on stakeholder requirements broadly meet with your experience, and then there should be a selection for you to answer yes or no. So we'll give you a few seconds to respond to that, and we'll have a look at the results as they come through. So it looks like that is coming through as a yes, which is reflected in what we've been talking about. So that's very comforting from our point of view. And now pass over to Angela and Clemmy to talk about the proposed scope, model and lotting structure for HSR.
Thank you, Lucy. What is the proposed scope for HSR? So HSR will primarily focus on health customers, including NHS trusts and the customers listed here. We also have central government customers with health worker requirements such as Ministry of Defence and DWP, and we offer social workers for the NHS and local authorities. As we outlined earlier, the scope for HSR will include the current services we offer under our 3 health workforce frameworks: multidisciplinary, non-medical, non-clinical and workforce management. In addition, we are also proposing to include permanent recruitment, including international recruitment, consultancy and statement of work for workforce planning and optimisation services. And we have also included new resourcing models for hybrid bank and agency supply, which could also include technology-enabled solutions. Clemmy will now take you through the proposed lotting structure for HSR.
So you should be able to see a slide now with a diagram on it setting out the lot structure. I expect that's what a lot of you were waiting to see. I should really clarify here, first of all, that the content on this slide and the next slide is really very much our starting point. This isn't locked down, this isn't finalised, this is our starting point. And what we want to do is to use the ongoing supplier and customer engagement to develop and hone the strategy. So this may well change, and if you've got views on it, if you've got thoughts on it, please do feedback to us either on the chat function now or through some of the other engagement methods we'll talk about later. So in overview, we're looking at a framework of 3 years with options to extend for up to 2 additional years. The framework will be UK-wide, it'll be national in reach, as is typical with CCS agreements. We are looking this time round at a single agreement. So as you know, at the moment, we've got a series of kind of slightly separate agreements. What we're looking at this time round is a single agreement with separate lots, 6 separate lots covering the different areas of the agreement. And really the reason for that, kind of touching on what Lucy's already said, is that we've had very strong feedback from customers that they really want a much more simplified approach. They want to be able to go to one agreement that will provide a range of requirements and joined up solutions. So we've got a really good opportunity to, I think, kind of simplify the landscape here with a single agreement. Suppliers, I should say here, will have the opportunity to apply for a single lot, several lots, or all lots, depending on your specialisms and capabilities. So it'll be very flexible in terms of how you respond to it. And I'm now going to go on the next slide to talk just in a little bit more detail about the lot structure and what we see as covered under each section. And I'll spend a little bit of time going through this because I think this is probably going to be one of the kind of key areas of interest for those on the webinar today. So, as I said, 6 proposed lots, but very much open for discussion. The first lot, lot 1, will be a new lot, and that will cover permanent recruitment, specifically clinical and social care roles. As I mentioned earlier on, we have an agreement which is currently being tendered for common roles. So this will be very much clinical and social care roles, and it will include international recruitment within the scope. Suppliers will not be required to cover all role types to bid, so I want to make that clear now. We're not looking at complete coverage. So, if you're a supplier of permanent recruitment for doctors only, for example, you will still have the opportunity to bid for this lot. Moving on to lot 2, that will really be the replacement for our current CCS multi-discipline work, RM 3711. And that will cover agency supply for all clinical and social care roles. So we're talking doctors, nursing, allied health professionals, social workers. Again, as with the previous one, suppliers will not be required to cover all of those roles to bid. So, for example, a specialist AHP provider would be able to apply in this lot and could have a place in this lot. Lot 3 will be the replacement for our current non-medical, non-clinical NMNC agreement, RM 971. And that will cover agency supply for non-clinical roles. So we're talking about things like admin and clerical, corporate, IT, ancillary roles, clinical coding, etc. Again, as with the previous one, suppliers are not going to be required to cover all roles, so you will have an option to cover some or kind of more of those, but a specialist IT provider, for example, would be able to bid in this one. Another thing to just touch on in terms of lots 2 and 3, the intention is to have an open commercial model for these lots. So customers will choose their approach, be that preferred supplier list, be that master vendor, neutral vendor, direct engagement, etc. And CCS will not prescribe the approach. Moving on to lot 4, which we're calling here flexible stroke bank. This will be the replacement for the current workforce management RM 1072 framework. And it will cover staff banks for clinical and non-clinical role types. And as again has been mentioned earlier on, very much built into that scope will be things like collaborative banks and also combined bank and agency managed service model types. So we're looking at delivering bank, but also the potential to deliver bank and the cascade to agency. So Lot 5 is a new workforce optimisation services, strategy and statement of work, SOW. And is likely to cover activities such as roster design, workforce planning, demand management, and clinic services and initiatives. And we're doing lots of engagement on that at the moment because, as I say, that is a new one for us, so we want to really understand how that would work and how that could be best used by customers. And finally, Lot 6, this will be for hybrid and tailored resourcing solutions, which really could include the services, any of the services covered in the previous lots. So it's more of a kind of pick and mix approach. It's about customers choosing obviously kind of role types they want to be included in the managed service, and then kind of from a supplier perspective, it's about building a tailored to meet those, which may include different solutions for different requirements. So, for example, perhaps a bank approach for nursing, but a neutral vendor for doctors, for example. I don't know. Those kind of things might fit into that lot. And really, it's about creating a bit of flexibility here. We know things are changing. You've agreed with us that you foresee quite a lot of change in this market, and we want to give the opportunity to our customers to be able to access some of these new technologies, some of these new solutions that are coming out, and to build, models which are tailored for their needs. Finally, just to say, all lots are anticipated to have call-off through both direct award and further competition, with the exception of Lot 6, where we think customers will really need to be undertaking a further competition because of the tailored solution nature of that lot. So that's our current thinking on that. I will now pass over to Angela for some more questions.
Thank you, Clemmy. So I think it'd be useful at this point to get some feedback on the proposed lotting structure. So there's a polling question on the screen now, which is, do you believe health sector's key resourcing requirements could be met by the proposed lotting? And that's a yes or no answer. So we give you a few seconds to respond to that question. So it seems like yes is coming through there. So helpful that you think we're on the right track, but obviously we would really appreciate your detailed feedback, and I will go over how you can input a bit later. Polling question number 5, we just wanted to get maybe some early indications around which of the proposed staff resourcing lots could your organisation service? And as Clemmy said earlier, that's not, you can be one or more than one. So there's a multiple selection there of 5 on the screen. If you wanted to just select one or as many as your service could provide, that would be useful for us to know at this stage. Okay, so we seem to have, lots of NMC, non-clinical popping up there. Really useful to have your feedback. We'll take those away with us and feed that into the consultation. And then our final question is, would you be interested in tendering for the proposed opportunity? And we'll just give you a few seconds to just respond to that one. I guess that's an overwhelming yes, so you're on the right webinar. Thank you. Okay. Right, in this final section now, we'll cover a review of the timelines for HSR, other ways you can input into the project, and how you can access some further information. So on the screen now, we have the provisional timelines for HSR are detailed here. As you all know, the prior information notice has been released and we are currently in the market engagement phase. We'll be developing the specification, the pricing and the evaluation from June to September this year, with a planned October date for release of the OJU. The tender, including the evaluation, will run up to March 2019, with award planned in April 2019 to allow a good transition period April to June 2019 to move spend over for existing customers on those 3 current live frameworks we have. We will be updating this schedule if there are any changes, and we will obviously keep you informed. Thank you for your comments so far, and it will be really useful for us, and we won't read them out, but we'll take them away with us, if you could provide a top 3 kind of make or break points for us to consider. We will review them all and we'll try to incorporate as many as we can. And any questions we don't get around to on today's webinar will also be pulled together into a frequently asked questions document, and we will publish that to our website. If you'd like to provide further feedback, there's an email address to provide comments. We'll also be putting an RFI for suppliers to complete on the website early next week. If you'd like to respond to that, the link to the website is here. Just to reiterate, we really do appreciate your input, and as part of our supplier engagement programme, we've already contacted all the suppliers who expressed an interest in the PIN and offered some one-to-one sessions with the CCS team. We don't have unlimited sessions, unfortunately, so we've allocated on a first-come, first-served basis specialities across the lots. And we're doing 60 sessions with a large cross-section of the market over the next 2 weeks to get more detailed questions. But just to be clear, for those of you who perhaps aren't coming to see us face-to-face, you know, that won't confer any advantage on suppliers, and they're not receiving any further information than we've shared in the webinar today. The sessions are very much focused on getting feedback on our approach from suppliers. So if you're not participating in the one-to-ones, please do send your comments and feedback to the People Pillar email address, or complete the RFI to provide your feedback, as we will absolutely use all sources of information in developing our strategy. And moving on to the next slide. Okay, so finally, thank you all very much for your attendance today. We really do appreciate your feedback. As Clemmy mentioned earlier, we'll be publishing the presentation slides to our website, and the link is included here. Any updates to timelines and the RFI we previously mentioned will also be posted to the website. We'll take the opportunity now to maybe answer a couple of key questions that have come through. Clemmy's going to take some questions.
There's a few questions coming through. It's a little bit tricky to see them all just kind of coming up. So I'm just going to pick up 2 initial ones that I've seen there. Yeah, I'll have a little look in a second and see if there are any more. So one of the questions is around small, medium enterprises. How will SMEs be able to engage with this agreement? And very much we see a place for SMEs within this framework. You'll notice obviously that certainly the first 3 lots where we've got our permanent recruitment lot and then our agency, clinical and agency, as we said, they'll be on an open commercial model, and we foresee there being quite a large number of suppliers on those lots, and as we said, you know, there will be no requirement to cover all role types, so specialist niche smaller suppliers will very much be able to bid within that lot. So that's kind of one place where we see SMEs having a role within the agreement. We also clearly, in some of the other lots where there might be a managed service approach, we still see you know, SMEs and agents, smaller agencies having a potential role within the supply chain within those agreements. And as with our current CCS health workforce agreements, we will be enabling the addition of suppliers via subcontracting routes and so on. So, you know, from our perspective, you know, there is very much an opportunity there for you if you are a smaller supplier, as well as if you're larger. I also saw a question about direct award, which I think was questioning, there was a question around, can direct award be kind of misused by suppliers, by customers sometimes? And does it just result in customers kind of sticking with the existing supplier? And I think, yes, potentially there is that risk, but actually one of the things that we want to do as part of this, as I said, we want to enable a change journey here. So we'll be working very closely, both with suppliers and customers, to look at how customers can get the best out of this framework, and that will include looking at different suppliers, different routes to talent, different approaches and models and so on. And we really do look to you as suppliers to support us with that. And I think if you've got specific ideas or thoughts or views on how that might work, then please do send them in either through the chat function or through the web address that Angela mentioned earlier on, and happy to have a kind of further discussion on that, because yes, we obviously want customers to get the best possible outcome, and we recognise in some senses that might be doing something a little bit different and for opening up their kind of approaches. I don't know if anybody else wanted to say anything on that.
I suppose just to say that the direct award option is something that customers have specifically asked for. I think sometimes perhaps if it is a smaller volume contract for a tactical, urgent resource requirement, then the NHS, who, staff are often quite pushed and they really do want to keep that option and preserve that option. But certainly we would always advise that, better value can be found through further competitions, but that's not always practically possible. So we certainly want to offer both of those options to customers.
Excellent. So just two more questions I've just spotted. One kind of procedural question, a couple of the procedural questions. I think one of the polling questions didn't allow you to make multiple selections, despite the fact we said it would. So apologies for that. But again, if you've got some specific feedback on that, put it in the chat function, write it out, or email it to us, and we can pick that up. So yeah, sorry that we said you could do something you couldn't there. Another question around permanent recruitment and the fact that we're kind of looking to kind of focus on clinical permanent recruitment in this agreement. Just to reiterate, I think I mentioned earlier, but just to say again, the reason that we don't have the kind of more common roles, the non-clinical roles included, is because we are currently in the process of tendering a permanent recruitment agreement at CCS, which will cover all of those non-clinical roles. So it will cover executive recruitment and also volume recruitment for a range of roles, common role types, finance, DDAT, and so on. So I think probably there are a few more questions coming in, but we're struggling a little bit to see them while we're actually doing the webinar. So I think the best approach is probably if we take these away and write up some kind of more detailed responses to you, including obviously to the ones that I've just that we've just answered on the line. So we will write those up and we will circulate those as FAQs via our website and via APSCo.
Thank you, Clemmy. And just to reiterate, the RFI will go up on the website early next week, so please do respond to that. We would appreciate your input. We're also carrying on with our supplier one-to-ones, and certainly any questions that come through that forum we'll also add to the frequently asked questions list, and we will be publishing that to everyone. We will plan to do another webinar and give you some more engagement when we've pinned down what the HSR lotting structure will look like before we go out to ODU. We'll come back and give you an update on the progression of our strategy and any changes that we've made during the consultation process. And finally, just many thanks to APSCo and our colleagues here who've been really helpful in setting up the webinar for us today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much. I think we owe a huge thank you to Maggie, Clemmy, Angela and Lucy from the CCS for coming along today and spending some time to talk to our members. We're incredibly grateful for that, we really are. And we're working closely with them, so we will keep liaising with them and provide you with any updates, and another webinar would be fantastic. I would really appreciate that. I hope you found today useful. I really did. I've taken loads of notes. I think I also just need to say, if you have any other queries, obviously you can go directly to the CCS, or you can come to APSCo as well, to our legal help desk by all means, and we will pass on any questions or comments that we can't already answer or aren't in the FAQs. Finally, apologies for the technical glitch at the beginning of the session. Isn't it always the way? Normally these things go off fairly smoothly, but hopefully you managed to get on and you managed to see all the slides and listen to our representatives from CCS. So thanks again for joining. I think that's it. I hope you enjoyed it, and we'll hopefully talk to you again soon via another webinar. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.